Hi and welcome. I'm Judy from Hope Dementia Ministry. Our topic today is understanding inflammation, and we're going to specifically talk about fibromyalgia in that vein, but I want to give everyone an understanding of inflammation from a basic perspective. So let me read you the definition of inflammation. The complex biological response to harmful stimuli, such as pathogens, damaged cells, or irritants. It's a protective attempt by the organism to remove the damaged stimuli as well as initiate the healing process for the tissue. So inflammation is a natural protective device that our body has to attack something that's foreign, to attack infections, and to heal our body. The problem is when the inflammation becomes chronic, and that means that the response lingers for a long time, leaving the body in a constant state of alert. So when your body is always ready to go, is always up, that's very damaging to the tissue. When we look at the diseases that are attributed to inflammation, it's things like type 2 diabetes, chronic heart disease, cancers, rheumatoid arthritis, autoimmune diseases like lupus, and fibromyalgia. So when we think about heart disease and type 2 diabetes, those are the two that we talk about the most in the dementia setting. Because we know, and it's so incredibly documented, how much those have to do, what a big role they have to play in the whole dementia story. We also know that they are preventable and even reversible. So understanding what causes inflammation and how we can do things that are anti-inflammatory for the body are the things that we need to concentrate on so that we can be a little bit more protective of all of our cells and especially of our brains. So let's talk about some of the causes of inflammation. Things like smoking, obesity, alcohol, those all play a role. But then things that we've talked about before in these sessions, poor diet, especially a diet that's high in sugar, highly processed oils, and low in fiber. Also, lack of physical activity can be inflammatory for the body. Poor sleep, which is either sleep deprivation or sleep apnea, sleep issues, just not getting quality sleep is hard on the body. But then there's also environmental exposures like polluted air and water that, we don't have that much control over. There's exposure to metals in our environment that we aren't aware of, that we have direct control over. And then there are something called electromagnetic fields. And this is not something that I have talked a lot about before, but we know that we're seeing more and more dementia. We know that we're seeing more and more electronic devices in our world. We don't just have electric toasters and things like that anymore. We have whole house systems that are all talking to each other, and you can control everything from your cell phone. So we have Wi-Fi this and Wi-Fi that. We have those smart meters on the outsides of our houses. We live by high voltage electric wires. And cell towers. So we have a lot more electromagnetic fields, man-made electromagnetic fields surrounding our bodies than we have in past generations. And there's a lot of studies that show that there are negative effects from this. We don't know exactly, but there's a lot of anecdotal evidence and a lot of studies really working on this. We talk about someone who's using a cell phone a lot and developing brain tumors. And some people want to dismiss this because when we look at the people who get them, other people are on their phones a lot and they don't get them. But we know that some people are more susceptible to some things than others. Like some people can smoke a whole lifetime and not develop lung cancer. Why is that? Some people can be exposed to sun and be sunbathers their whole lifetime and not develop skin cancer, where other people, they have different type of skin, they have different genetic makeup, and so they're more predisposed to developing, something like that due to that irritant. Another really common cause for inflammation for us in our lives is chronic stress. Stress is another thing that is good for the body. There is that reaction when something bad happens and you get that rush of stress hormone that's supposed to help you make the decision of, do I fight? Do I run? What do I do? But then it's supposed to come back down. But many of us live in environments now where we are experiencing chronic stress. And we look at some people who have developed heart disease and maybe they didn't have bad habits that we typically think of as promoting heart disease, or we see someone who has developed dementia and we think, well, they were healthy and they were active and all this kind of thing, but they still developed dementia. Why is that? And one of the answers to that could be chronic stress. When we think about higher education being protective for the brain, because you're building your brain more, you're getting more brain mass to have on reserve, but a lot of educated people still develop dementia. But when you think about someone who's really educated, been through a lot of college classes, they maybe didn't get much sleep because they're studying all the time and they're under a lot of pressure and there's a lot of testing. And then when they get a new job, they have to work really hard to prove themselves. So there's a lot of stress built into those kinds of things that could be the reason why, they weren't overweight and they didn't have a poor diet, but they still developed dementia. So we have to think about what chronic stress does to us. When someone is stressed a lot, all the time, their body is coursing with cortisol, and that's the stress hormone that's very inflammatory to your blood vessels, to your organs in your body, and it's definitely something that contributes to brain fog and the development of dementia. So let's talk now specifically about fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia is becoming more and more diagnosed. The reason it wasn't so readily diagnosed in the past is because there's not really a blood test for it specifically. You can't just go in and do a blood test like you can with lupus. You do a blood test and they can tell that you have it. Fibromyalgia is typically diagnosed when they rule out everything else. So it's not rheumatoid arthritis, and it's not lupus, and it's not this, and it's not that, but you still have these symptoms, so it must be fibromyalgia. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia in the early 90s. So some of the symptoms that go along with it are, and they vary from person to person, but fatigue, muscle pain, skin sensitivity, mouth sores, brain fog, trouble sleeping, low mood, irritable bowel syndrome also goes along with it. And, we think about all of those different symptoms. Some people might have all of them. Some people might have a few of them. But, when you go to the doctor and they sort out what symptoms you have, like when I went in the 90s, I was right away issued pain reliever. So, an NSAID, a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, so something to reduce inflammation. I wasn't sleeping well, so I was also given an antidepressant because that's supposed to make you drowsy and help you sleep. And I also had irritable bowel syndrome, and they're like, oh yeah, that goes right along with it, so here's a drug for that. And no one said, what are you eating? I was thin, so I guess they weren't questioning that, what my eating habits were. I wasn't overweight, but when I really looked at my diet, I wasn't on the right path with that, although I had no idea at the time. Medical doctors have historically been taught to prescribe medication. And so if someone comes to them with a symptom, they're like, I have a pill for that. And you say, well, now, I have this other symptoms. Well, I have a pill for that. Well, I think these medications are causing some side effects. Oh, well, you can take something for that too. Instead of looking at what's causing it, because I would always ask, what's causing this? What's happening? What's going wrong that I'm developing this? And they would always say, we just don't know. And it wasn't until I was working on dementia education and really trying to figure out what is causing dementia. What are the different things that are contributing to it? And what can we do to do something about it? Because sitting around waiting for science to come up with a drug that's going to cure it has just been, a futile effort. And so as soon as I started getting into some of the reading and some of the education that went along with studying inflammation, I knew I was reading about myself. And so in 2016, I decided to do some dramatic lifestyle changes. And I've talked about these before when we do the brain health topic, but what they were was, I was on pain medication, I was on the antidepressant, I was on medication for IBS, I was exercising. That was one of my go-to anti-inflammatory choices. But I realized that my diet was not good. I've always eaten lots of fruits and vegetables, but I was always really big on sugar as well. Whether it was Golden Oreos or Snickers bars or Twizzlers or you name it, that's what I enjoyed. So I thought, okay, I'm going to see if I can make a difference for myself with this, because I don't want to take something to the people that are coming to my classes and say, well, this is what you should do, if it's not something I can do myself. And if I'm not really sure, I like to test things out and find out what kind of a difference it could be. So in 2016, in August, I had my blood work done, and then I decided I was going to make some changes. So I gave myself 3 months to cut out the sugar because I couldn't do it just cold turkey. I know I see sometimes on these TV shows and movies where they go in and they just empty a person's kitchen and they put all this stuff in there that they've never eaten before and they're not familiar with, and they kind of go crazy. So I did it gradually. I didn't throw away anything. I just ate it slowly, and then I didn't replace it. So I cut out the candy and the cookies and the baked goods and all of that kind of stuff that was really highly sugar oriented. And at the same time, I knew that my diet was lacking in healthy fat, because growing up in the 70s, my mom was always on a diet, and they were vilifying fat. And so we were afraid of fat. So I thought, if low fat is good, then no fat must be better. And so I didn't eat nuts, I didn't eat cheese, I drank skim milk, all these kind of things. So fat was almost absent in my diet. And so I started adding in the things that were the healthy fats, not the animal fats, not the saturated fats, not the full fat dairy products or anything, but nuts, avocados, olive oil. I had never used any kind of oil or any kind of fat type like that. Did not eat nuts too high in fat, but they're all, it's the good fat. It's the fat that's healthy for you. So that was the part of the first change. And dramatically in 2 weeks into this, my gut settled, was calm, was quiet, no more bloating. It was unbelievable, because by the end of 2 weeks, I had eaten up all my sugar food. And so I had gradually cut that out. So I know that for me, sugar is a big trigger. And I had such dramatic improvement in the irritable bowel syndrome, I was able to stop taking that medication. So I thought, well, that was a great success. So the next thing I wanted to do was cut out the simple carbohydrates. So that meant bread. Bread is one of my favorite things, whether it's Panera or, bagels, Asiago cheese. I thought I would never give that up, but I felt so much better that I thought I'm gonna take it the next step. So I did. I cut out any refined pasta, bread, all those kinds of things, anything that was made with refined flour. If it was 100% whole grain, like oatmeal, 100% whole wheat, that I could continue to eat. I didn't really know what that was because that wasn't really part of my diet, so I did some experimenting with that. And then the other thing that I did over this 6-month period was increase the fiber. I've always been big on fruits and vegetables, but not as big on like kale. I had it now and then. I like spinach. I had spinach a lot. So I really introduced kale into my diet, and we had kale several times a week, whether it was dried or fresh in a salad or sauteed in some kind of a stir fry. We worked kale in on a regular basis. So I increased my fiber. I decreased my sugar, I decreased my my simple carbohydrates, and I added in the healthy fats. And by December, I felt like a different person. So not only were the gut issues dramatically improved, but the overall pain issue that I had from fibromyalgia was so lessened that I felt like I could go off all of my medication altogether. The other thing that I had was mouth sores. I chronically had canker sores, and great big ones my lips would swell up, and I couldn't eat, I couldn't brush my teeth. Sometimes I couldn't talk. I had no mouth sores for the first time since I was a kid. And so I thought, all right, there's something going on here that I really need to pay attention to. So on my own, and I admit I did not go back to the doctor for this because I felt like the doctor failed me to begin with. So I didn't go back and say I'm going off the medication. I just went off it. And I felt really good until January. Then I started having headaches and nausea, and so I ended up going to my doctor. She ordered a brain scan. I ended up going to a neurologist, and he said what I was having was chronic migraines. And so he wanted to put me back on a low dose of the pain medication and a low dose of the antidepressant. Those two working together should maintain the headaches. I didn't want to go back on the antidepressant because when I went off that, I discovered that I was dreaming dramatically, like I had never dreamed before. And so I told him this, and he said, oh, that's a good observation because antidepressants can mess with your REM sleep. And I thought, REM sleep is super important for your memory. One of the other symptoms that I had, the brain fog, and I didn't even really know what that was, but I mentioned to my doctor, before all of this, that I felt like I had memory issues. Like I couldn't remember what I did in the morning. I couldn't remember what my schedule was. As soon as something was done, I'm like, push the dump button. I don't have to remember that anymore. I didn't know what I was going to do tomorrow unless I was looking at my calendar. And so I didn't realize the brain fog that was caused because I wasn't getting quality sleep. So the big improvement that really excited me after all this, I mean, my gut was much better, my pain level was much better, but my brain fog was gone. I don't use a paper calendar anymore. I have it on my phone, but I don't have to refer to it all the time. I know what I'm doing tomorrow. I know what my appointments are tomorrow. I know what the weekend looks like. I can picture my calendar in my head. I don't need that crutch anymore. So getting off the carbohydrates, getting some healthy fats back into my system, getting off the heavy medications, I just feel so much better. I've also been dramatically working on my sleep, and I keep a very steady sleep schedule so that I go to bed at the same time every night, and I just automatically wake up at the same time every morning. I always thought I was just not a morning person because I'd have to set my alarm, and I could hit my alarm, I'd tell you, for an hour, and I'd go right back to sleep, no problem. Now I wake up and I'm awake, and it's the same time every day. It is just amazing. And I feel good. I don't feel groggy because I'm not over medicated. I feel ready to tackle the day. I feel energetic. And so, you know, when we look at what was I setting myself up for? I had dramatic pain, I had brain fog, I had gut issues. If I had continued on that same path, I may well have been setting myself up for developing a case of dementia. But because I made such dramatic changes, not that I have protected myself so that I will never develop dementia, but maybe I will be able to push it way back. We're all going to die. We know that we're going to die of something at some point. But I would prefer that my body just wear out than that I am going to, you know, develop dementia and have all those complications toward the end of my life. So when we think about the other thing that I know is a big part of my life, because my fibromyalgia is not cured. I know the other big impact for me has been stress. And I have had a stressful life ongoing. When I was 13, I was sexually assaulted. And I lived many, many years in fear. I was afraid. I was a nervous wreck. I had lots of anxiety. I had got lots of counseling, but you know, that just seemed to be a part of who I was. I was also in a long, unhealthy marriage for many years. And the chronic stress of that, I know, is something that contributed to my disease. That may well have been the basis of what started it. And then the poor sleep, you know, as a result of that, the poor diet did not help. But as I work through those kinds of things, I can tell that it's still there, but it's on a much lower level. And sometimes I feel really, really good. I will say that in the month of September, I took on some work as a census taker. And for me, it was very stressful. I am a shy, reserved person. And so here I am walking up to a stranger's door, knocking on a complete stranger's door and asking them personal questions. That was not comfortable for me. So I would really get worked up. Every day that I knew I had work, I would get very worked up. I would be nervous while I was out there. Then I have to sit in my car and punch all kinds of information into this little device. And so people are looking at me like, why was I in their neighborhood? And it was very stressful for me. And I had a big blowout case of fibromyalgia. And so I know it's something that's with me. I don't feel I have cured it. I feel I have dramatically improved it, but it's still something that's there. And just like with heart disease or diabetes, we talk about if you reverse something, you may not be able to fully reverse some damage that has happened. If you have had a heart attack, you might have permanent damage to your heart, but you can reverse the things that have caused that so that you don't work into that again. If you have had diabetes and like my mom has damage to her eyes, damage to her kidneys, and she has neuropathy in her feet, although she is not diabetic at this time, she still has damage that has been caused by the disease. And so I think that's what I'm living with at this time. I think it is going to be an ongoing deal for me. So in order to, you know, looking at the stress as the major thing, that the component that's still left, I have to work on how can I lower my stress level. And that's something that you as dementia caregivers are all exposed to. The stress is something that we just sort of take on and we try not to think about or we ignore. But if you really think about it, if you think about your neck muscles and the tension that you might be carrying, and in the core of your body, we carry so much stress there. And if you think about your muscles, oh yeah, they are all tight. What does it take to relax those? And what are we doing to help ourselves get there? And I say ourselves because I'm not there yet. I am not able to, meditate as often as I'd like. I'm not able to resist that stress reaction. Like if something happens, if I get a phone call about something that's gone wrong, immediately I can feel that stress hormone pulsing through my body. And I have to really stop and take some breaths and try to react to that in a positive way rather than just going on and letting it be that heightened state of alert all the time. So it's an ongoing process. It's something that I know I need to keep working on, but I understand the importance of, and I recognize when it happens. I recognize when I am going there. I recognize that feeling of the cortisol running through my body. And so right away I think about, oh, inflammation, that's causing cells to be inflamed. And so I want to try to relax. I want to take this on. I want to have control over this. It's not there yet, but I'm getting there. And that's what you need to do when you're thinking about any of these changes that you want to try to make to protect your body. You have to take it a step at a time, a little at a time. You can't just do all of this across the board. It just doesn't work that way. You'll give up and you'll say, just forget it, it's too hard. But if you can pick one thing and give it so many weeks, and then pick another thing and add to that and build on that. They say if you do something for 21 days, it becomes a habit. And so if we can think about building these habits, what kind of good habits do I want to have? So set myself up for trying to make that happen 3 weeks in a row. And if I'm successful at making it happen 3 weeks in a row, then I'm on my way to being successful for 3 months and 3 years and 30 years and the rest of my life. So thinking about it that way, taking small steps, getting support, get someone, a friend or a family member to join you in this, understanding what's going on and what you need to do to address this and to alleviate some of your stress. And, that's why this is all so kind of interconnected. As caregivers, you need to rely on other people. You can't take all the stress on yourself because it's killing us. And so if we can reach out to other people for support, for moral support, and, find a partner to walk with, find someone to cook some new recipes with, to experiment on some new foods, to meditate with, to help you stay focused. Whatever you can do to bring someone else on board, to help you understand where you're going, where you're making some improvements, those are all things that are going to reflect on you positively. So I hope that has helped you understand the relationship between inflammation and what it does to our brains. Our brains are more susceptible to inflammation than other body systems, than other organs in the body. And that may be a key to why we're seeing so much more dementia, because our brains are sensitive. And if they're being bombarded with stress hormone and with insulin, which is another hormone, that is going to kill off brain cells. And so we want to think about what we can do to not let that happen, to put the brakes on that, and even to reverse some of these things that we've gotten ourselves into. So I hope that's been helpful and help you understand. If you have more questions, you can always contact me, through email or give me a call and we can talk more about it. Thank you.